Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, it's a very, very exciting day today because in Germany, the G7 heads of state are meeting. We didn't get an invitation, but nonetheless, they're having a very big meeting. It's going to last several days. And then the big enchilada at the end of the week will be the NATO summit in Madrid, during which, of course, NATO will unveil its new strategic vision or strategic compass or whatever they call it. And they will issue, presumably, their formal invitation for Sweden and Finland to join. So a lot of backslapping and glad handing taking place this week. In the meantime, the Kaliningrad situation doesn't seem any closer to resolution because Lithuania, population less than 3 million, is refusing to make any concessions on the transit of goods to and from Kaliningrad and the Russian Federation. And in the meantime, the European Union has decided that they're going to put a cap on oil prices. This is very, very puzzling because I was always under the impression that price controls don't work. And if you say, well, we're not going to pay any more than whatever for a barrel, then the Russians are going to say, okay, well, that's how much you'll get. If you say, well, this is how much I'll pay for 1 kilo of meat, then you say, well, you're getting half a kilo. I mean, that's it. I mean, the price is what it is. I mean, they're not going to simply say, okay, fine. Well, if that's all you're prepared to pay, then we'll just give it to you for that price. So I have no idea how they think this this price cap is going to work.
I've read a number of stories yesterday and today on that. And George, you know what my reaction is? What are they talking about? How is this going to work? I don't get it. Well, Janet Yellen's, the prime mover behind it. So, it probably isn't comprehensible in her.
No, I think so. I mean, it's such an obvious problem because it's, if you tell the Russians we're only going to pay this amount, then the Russians will say, well, fine, then we'll just cut back on the volume you're going to get. I mean, that's all. I mean, this is what the price is. If that's all you're prepared to pay, then you'll get less oil. It's as simple as that. How are you going to stop Russia from just giving you less oil for the same amount of money?
Okay, well, the Indians will pick up the slack, I guess. Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And I mean, they're talking about this thing about whether they're going to cut the insurance from the shipping. So I say, well, we're not going to ship oil that goes above the price that we set. They're going to get insurance elsewhere. I mean, it's the Western insurance companies, and they're the only insurers in the world. So they've got this problem to address. And then I wanted to show you that Stoltenberg gave a kind of an interview to Politico, to Lily Bayer, she's their stalwart reporter. Lily Bayer usually is in the business of denouncing Orban. I mean, that's her beat, is Orban. But so she had an interview, and here was Stoltenberg delivering his stuff. We're going to defend every inch of Allied territory. We will adapt to the NATO force structure. We will also have more NATO forward deployed combat formation, more pre-positioned equipment and weapons stockpiles. And for the first time since the Cold War, we will have pre-assigned forces to defend specific allies so that we can reinforce much faster if needed. And then we got the strategic concept to guide NATO in a radically changed security environment. And then Lily Bayer says, the usual kind of question, which is, hey, do you think that it'll be enough to really reassure citizens in places such as the Baltic states that they are safe? The only thing that matters is not, world peace, security for everyone. It's just these tiny little Baltic states. What are we going to do in order to reassure them? And And then it was kind of an interesting thing because Stoltenberg goes off into a kind of a history lesson and says, well, this war didn't actually start in February. It started in 2014. What we saw in February was an escalation with the second invasion by Russian forces. And when that happened, we were well aware and we were very well prepared, because since 2014, we have, for the first time in our history, deployed combat-ready troops to the eastern part of the alliance, the Baltic countries and Poland, and increased the readiness of forces and increased defense spending. And then it goes on, since February, we have doubled the number of battle groups from 4 to 8, increased the size of the battle groups in Lithuania and Estonia, and then the United States has increased the number of US troops in Europe and so on and so forth. And then I remind you all this because I guess, you know, but this is the starting point from where we'll take new decisions and then more pre-positioned equipment. I think, if anything, if there's any lesson to be learned from Ukraine, is the importance of heavy equipment in place, but also fuel, ammunition supplies. And then we will also have pre-assigned forces that will exercise, train in their home country. But we will then have worked with and know well the terrain, the countries where they are supposed to be deployed if needed. So this is what Germany has just announced. You know, Germany will move into Lithuania, and there'll be, you know, so on, there'll be many other decisions, you know, hybrid space and other domains. And
but German troops are going to again be in the Baltic.
In the Baltics, exactly. You know, everyone's very excited. So
wow.
But what's kind of interesting here is that, first of all, he declares that Russia invaded. This is the second invasion. So Russia invaded in 2014. You know, what is, you know, what is the logic of saying Russia invaded, but the United States and NATO have not invaded Ukraine? I mean, Russia came in to help out the people of the Donbass. You call that an invasion? What the hell is NATO doing in Ukraine? Isn't that an invasion? I mean, you know.
And on top of it, if we want to throw in Crimea, and I can remember watching it live. I was in a hotel lobby, and unfortunately they had CNN on, and they were talking about the invasion of Crimea. There was no invasion of Crimea. There were troops, Russian troops and sailors already there. They had been there since the independence of Ukraine under international agreement and agreement between Moscow and Kiev. If my memory serves me correct, George, they had 3 different separate protocols, legitimizing, legalizing the. There was no invasion of Crimea. They were already there under an agreement with the Kiev government. So that is completely absurd what he was saying. What I think is really interesting, what you read, it really shows how useless Ukraine, NATO is. I mean, we started all of this in 2014. Well, what results have you garnered from all of your preparation? Zip.
Right. No, that's right. And then I just want to point out to something. This appeared in the Times of London today, and the author is somebody called Sir Lawrence Freedman. Now, he's quite a well-known military historian. He's at King's College London. He's been around for many years, and so he wrote this quite a lengthy article. And you know, the title is what it is: NATO has no choice but to support Kiev, and then our future security depends upon it. And what I think was interesting about this is the logic that he pursues. So here we have Soviet Union fragmented and the Warsaw Pact, its alliance evaporated. And then it says that you know, the optimism was not shared by Russia's former colonies. Colonies is a ridiculous term to use about you know, the Eastern European states, or even the republics of the USSR. I mean, they weren't colonies. I mean, it's just, you know. So, but anyway,
we had national communism in every single state.
Right, exactly. Those previously ruled from Moscow did not wish to repeat the experience and sought the security of alliance to enable them to stand up to any future Russian threat. And then he says, you know, this is Vladimir Putin, Russia's leader since 2000, displayed increasing disaffection with the new European order. He considered the territory of the former Soviet Union to be Russia's special sphere of influence, pointing to the large numbers of Russian speakers resident in those countries. But those countries did not want to be in a Russian sphere of influence, fearing Moscow would continue to use their economic and energy dependence upon its influence in their internal affairs and foreign policies. So,
okay. He considered the territory of the former Soviet Union to be Russia's special sphere of influence. Well, then let's. It says here Putin flips the script. Let's flip it again. So, is this NATO's sphere of influence? This is what Russia was saying.
Right.
Well, what nature abhors a vacuum, I guess.
Yes.
I mean, so it has to be one or the other. Well, if it's going to be one or the other, then I'm going to step up. Sorry.
Right. That's exactly it. And that's why this stuff is so absurd, because he wants to suggest, oh, well, these countries, they felt very unsafe. So they appealed to NATO, and NATO selflessly, out of the goodness of its heart, said, oh, all right, well, if you really need to, our help, we'll just do it. No, that doesn't happen. Little countries don't, get to decide the policies of the big countries. This is something NATO wanted. NATO pushed for. The United States under Bill Clinton began this push very early on. This was not a policy dictated by Lithuania. I mean, if United States didn't want it, Lithuania would have been, and Latvia and Estonia would have been told, no, you're not getting it. And then he goes on, for this reason, Ukraine, along with Georgia, also wanted to join NATO. 2008 almost agreed, but Angela Merkel was concerned this would be too provocative for Russia. The result was a messy compromise whereby the door was not closed to membership, but no immediate steps were taken to make it happen, leaving Ukraine frustrated and Russia still provoked. Putin disliked the idea of this large and antithetical military alliance dominating the area. Now, what's interesting is that this, he reaches this point, and then the next logical step would be, okay, so if he didn't like it, why did you push it? Why did you push a policy that you knew Russia didn't like and was going to provoke a reaction? I mean, there were people like all the George Cannons and others were saying, this is going to provoke a reaction. So why did you push it? What's the rationale for pushing a policy that's going to provoke Russia? So now this is when these people immediately have to shift their argument. Oh, no, there's nothing to do with that. No, they either say, no, these NATO promises, usually they say, oh, no, these NATO promises, they weren't really serious. They were just simply empty talk, yeah, someone down the road. So either that, or they say, well, Putin doesn't really have a problem with NATO. It's democracy that he has a problem with. It's all about democracy, nothing to do with NATO. No. So that, you can see the intellectual dishonesty, because basically he's reached a point in the argument saying, well, why did you do something so stupid and so provocative as when you knew Russia was very unhappy about this? No, his real problem was that he abhorred the idea of Ukraine going its own way as an independent state.
No.
The more autocratic he became, the more he feared the contagion effect of popular movements such as the Orange Revolution, when the Ukrainians protested against rigged election, and the Maidan uprising, a protest against Yanukovych succumbing to Russian pressure to abandon the agreement with the EU. And then when Yanukovych fled Ukraine and a Western-oriented government took over, it was too much for Putin. Russia seized Crimea and promoted violent upheavals in eastern Ukraine.
Well, every single sentence is a problem in the way I look at it. What they did was, we can focus on the Maidan coup. They broke a very fragile state and set the inevitability of what we see right now. Okay, and so. Please believe me, everybody. The argument, this was democracy versus autocracy is absolutely farcical. Okay, calling Ukraine a democracy, well, I guess a oligarchic democracy, right. Would you call it, George? Right. I mean, you had the state captured by these oligarchs. Okay, yep. That's what we have here. There was nothing democratic about the coup whatsoever. I mean, the number, there was the Constitutional Court didn't have a number, it wasn't in session, it wasn't allowed to convene. There was no quorum in the Rada whatsoever to ratify any of these things. I mean, it is completely legal. And he's talking about democracy. Well, there was no rule of law whatsoever. The Russian people are afraid of becoming like Ukraine, and that's why they want to avoid it.
Right. That's right. That's right. But in any case, Yanukovych was the elected president. He was the one who was entitled by law to make these decisions. If his decision was that this EU association agreement was not in Ukraine's interest, and it wasn't in Ukraine's interest, then that was his prerogative. You don't just simply overthrow a government because you don't like his policies. I mean, that's the whole point of a democracy, that you remove the government in a legal process via elections. He's entrusted to make those decisions about the future of the state.
And furthermore, foolishly, he agreed to political reform, meaning there would be within 6 months there would be new elections. That's when you know you're in trouble. Okay, that's that's the hallmark of where things are going to start going wrong, because you're making concessions. Okay, and he did, and he was foolish to do it.
Yes.
And as someone challenged me of this whole thesis, I said, well, he told me, he said, well, Yanukovych just ran away. And I said, so you were on the phone line with Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Piaf, right? You were on that line. You were in that conversation, right? Which, of course, no, I don't put much stock into that. Oh yeah, that's why YouTube took it down. Right. Okay, after 8 years, right. And then out of sheer anger from the YouTube community, they had to put it back up. Okay.
That's and then he goes on. NATO countries objected to the annexation of Crimea, imposing modest sanctions. Yet still the alliance stuck with a dual-track approach, diplomatic efforts to resolve the dispute. France and Germany in particular were direct participants in the Minsk protests, an attempt to forge a deal by which the Russian-backed enclaves in Luhansk and Donetsk would stay part of Ukraine in return for being given an outsized role in the country's governance.
Not true.
Not true at all. Because that is not what it said. The Minsk agreement, it's very brief, and they were given a substantial autonomy. It's not an outsized role. Moreover, and it's the restoration of their own language. Remember the first act, well, obviously, but anyone who needs to be reminded that the first act of the coup leaders was to remove Russian as the official language in that part of Ukraine. I mean, Russian was not an official language anywhere else in Ukraine except in the Donbass. And the first act was to remove Russian as an official language. So that kind of explains why they may have got a little bit upset about the coup leaders.
And to add to that is that the reason why Yanukovych was elected president, recognized by the West as being elected and inaugurated, was because of the people of what is now the two Donbass republics and Crimea. You take that out of the equation, and then he wouldn't have been, because that was his power base. Those are the people that voted for him.
That's right.
And they say, you took our president away.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right. And then it says, a new model, thus one effect of the brutal and criminal nature of the Russia's invasion has been to forge a remarkable NATO unity on the need to support Ukraine in a war that may last for many months, some say years, with an outcome that cannot be predicted with confidence. The conflict is already causing great economic pain and hardship, and may yet lead to gas rationing, even though member states are not engaged in the fighting. Again, then you think, okay, the next step should be, well, how about bringing it to an end and end this pain? But that's not where he's going.
Okay, if go back just real quick here. Okay, even though member states are not engaged in fighting, well, they are co-belligerents in this conflict. Okay,
right, exactly.
I don't know what this. Is this supposed to be a smart guy?
Well, I mean, he's been around for many years. I mean, he's supposed to be a kind of a very prominent, military historian. As at King's College London, Michael Howard was there. He's Sir Lawrence Freedman. He's been knighted, so he's a prominent military historian. So that's why. So I'm doing this. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't do it. Otherwise he's somebody who's quite well known. And then NATO leaders' determination to see this through is not simply because a Russian victory would be a blow to humanitarianism and international law, but also because it would have dire strategic consequences. Should Ukraine be incorporated into a greater Russia, along with Belarus, then there would be tension along the new border with NATO, requiring a prolonged effort to build up conventional defenses and reinforce deterrence. I don't understand that. It sounds like, well, we need to keep the war going because if we don't, then the war will keep going. I mean, it's like, so, I mean, it just doesn't, it doesn't.
Self-referential. Okay, should Ukraine be incorporated into Greater Russia? I'm not sure what he means by that.
know exactly. Yeah.
We have right on the eve of the start of the special military operation, we had Russia recognizing the sovereignty of Lugansk and Donetsk. Okay, so they're not part of Russia, Mr. Fancy Professor. They're not part of Russia. They may someday become part of Russia. We don't know.
Right.
But they're not incorporated into a Greater Russia. And Belarus is not either. Okay.
Exactly.
They have a union treaty, and Belarus very jealously guards its sovereignty. So again, I don't know. There's supposed to be a smart person that doesn't write smart things.
No, well, that's in itself is an interesting. Yeah. So Bill, and then he goes on. For now, Russia may not have the spare capacity to invade any more countries, but emboldened by victory in Ukraine, there is no reason to suppose that it would not continue to look for ways to harass and intimidate its adversaries. A temporary truce that left Russia still occupying some 20% of the country would leave nothing resolved. There would be regular skirmishing along a border of more than 600 miles and resistance and insurgency in the occupied territories, with sanctions still in place and continuing disruption in energy markets and to food supplies. So, in other words, we have to keep it going, because if we don't keep it going, it's going to keep going. I mean, that seems to be the and then he says, no, just one second. There's no reason to suppose that it would not continue to look for ways to harass and intimidate adversaries. Well, why shouldn't it? I mean, if they're adversaries, why not harass and intimidate them? I mean, why be nice to countries that are your adversaries and doing adverse things to your adverse things that are adverse to your interest?
If you're going to be killing their troops, I think they're going to shoot back.
Right.
The flaw of the many flaws in this here, it includes, well, if the fighting continues, then Ukraine will get smaller. So you'll be fighting for a smaller piece of real estate. Right. And if you keep fighting, then there will be no real estate to fight for. And then you want to have, NATO wants to go to war with Russia.
Right.
Okay. That's a craven choice.
Right. And then it says, this is one of those climactic moments in international affairs on which all future security arrangements depend.
All future, wow, that's really big, George.
That's very big. The alliance's unity may fray, but for now, the commitment has been made to support Ukraine as it seeks to drive out the occupiers. NATO cannot simply wait for Putin to depart the scene or for Russia to withdraw its forces. It must provide Ukraine with constant supplies of new weapons and ammunition, as well as financial support. This will require member states to increase production of the material that Ukraine needs while replenishing their own stocks. The security guarantees that come with NATO membership and which have now also attracted Finland and Sweden will be reaffirmed. Those states, such as Estonia, that feel especially vulnerable to Russian pressure must be reassured, including by permanently stationing troops there, though this would mean suspending the relevant provisions of the NATO-Russia Founding Act, And then the public must be prepared with due candor for the long haul.
So what is the public getting out of this, George?
That's kind of what I was thinking as I was reading this.
I think I'll use a fancy term. What is the public interest? What is the public good in this?
Right.
I don't see it. I mean, and what public in the West is going to say, yeah, we don't need energy. We don't need
food. I don't need food. I can go without food. I don't need goddamn heating in the winter. I'm good.
Well, maybe it comes further, which I doubt. But, I think it's important to interject at this point is that at this moment, as George and I are speaking, Ukraine, what the parts that you have control, is a military junta. Okay. I think it was last week when I was in St. Petersburg, the last opposition party was suspended and banned. Okay. So there's no political opposition. There is no real freedom of speech. There's one national television station.
Right.
Maybe regional station.
Right.
I don't know, but national censored media.
Right.
So, I mean, if this is all based on autocracy versus democracy, where's the democracy here, George?
There's no democracy. The other thing is that he's saying Russia is a threat, but then he kind of, he's up all a professor. He knows this is really ridiculous. I mean, how can Russia be a threat? He says, and then, well, it might be, a threat to, like the Baltic states. Well, then the obvious solution is don't antagonize Russia. I mean, if you're afraid of your big neighbor, then try to cultivate good relations with your big neighbor. I mean, if you're afraid of getting attacked by your big neighbor.
I would take it a step further. Get out of NATO, declare neutrality, and say, look, we're not involved in this here. Right? We want to have cordial relations with everyone. You know what, George? Historically speaking, maybe wrong here, but that's what small states usually do, don't they?
That's right. We want good relations with everyone. That's right. And then it says, the frustration for NATO is that it has limited means to shape the conflict. Economic aid, military assistance, and weapons supplies are vital, but member states are deterred from joining the fight because Putin has always identified this as a contingency that could bring Russia's nuclear weapons into play.
That's simply not true, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. In return, NATO deters Russia from picking on its member states, but not from continuing its war against Ukraine. Nor does the alliance have a diplomatic track to pursue. The 1997 Founding Act is effectively defunct. The G7 is also meeting this week, no longer the G8, blah, blah. So at this historic moment, NATO's strategy comes down to banking on Ukraine's resilience and its ability to fight effectively.
Are you going to take that bet, George?
No, I have no idea what they're. So we've got to keep this thing going in order to keep it going. I mean, he hasn't said. I mean, the supposed threat from Russia, he kind of tosses that into the mix. But obviously he realizes this is just too laughable that there's a threat of Russia to the rest of Europe. So he's not able, so we're supposed to, the whole of the continent has to mobilize against Russia. For what reason? I mean, it's like, but again, that's kind of very typical of the mindlessness that, well, it's certainly pervasive in Britain. We know from Johnson and Truss and all the rest, but it's very much pervasive in NATO land. I mean, not one of them has ever been able to explain why are we keeping this war going? What's in it for us?
That you exactly got it right, because NATO needs to expand because it needs to expand.
Right, exactly.
But why do you need to expand?
Right.
Well, we have to expand because that's what NATO does. We expand.
We expand.
Well, what's the security angle there? We have to expand for security.
That's right.
I mean, it's all circular reasoning.
So it's circular reasoning, but it's even worse than that, because of course, if you keep expanding to others, that looks aggression. That looks aggressive to me. I mean, if you keep moving your borders closer and closer to our borders, I'm not buying your thesis that you're defensive. And that's the point. Everybody said, "Oh, well, we're defensive. He's the one who's aggressive. I'm defensive." Hey, you're the one who's moving your borders. Russia's not moving its borders. You're moving your borders.
And immediately after the February coup of 2014, immediately, okay, two important things happened. Hunter Biden was parachuted in to start, his grift, and NATO moved in, and for 8 years. And I really want to be clear with everyone here. Ukraine, there's a David and Goliath, a little Ukraine and Russia's beat. No, there's nothing to that. Okay, for 8 years, there was military training, enormous amounts of material being brought in, intelligence. Okay, on the eve of February 24th, Ukraine had a very large army that I would not say had modernized, but was being modernized, okay? And it was poised to attack the Donbass. That's why all the troops were there. That's why the war is being fought there. And that's where it's going to be won for the Russians, because they failed at Kiev, and they didn't even try yet. Okay.
Yes.
And what they're doing is eliminating, demilitarizing their most important military assets, and they're all in the East. Okay. Right. So stop thinking, and Ukraine's a big place, everyone, on top of it. So, look at NATO. George and I have talked about this ad nauseum. Okay. It's basically a propaganda operation. There are American bases, American troops. There's a large Turkish military presence in Turkey, obviously, and it's environs. And then you have Ukraine. It's not Germany. It's not France. It's not the UK.
Right.
It's none of these countries have large, conventional speaking military at all. Okay, Ukraine did.
Ukraine did.
And then we never really thought. It wasn't really serious. Ukraine. But it was. I mean, what was NATO doing there for 8 years?
That's right. And that's why I read that thing from Stoltenberg, because Stoltenberg keeps bringing this up. And he does this all the time. He says, look at how much we have did for Ukraine over the past 8 years. So he's basically admitting it. I mean, he admits it again and again and again that you basically brought all your military hardware and you've been dumping it in Ukraine for 8 years. All oblivious to how the Russians were going to respond to this. What do you think Russia was going to do? Just going to sit there and just watch this? Why do you just need to turn this into just a big arms dump on its border? A country run by absolutely rabid, Russophobic neo-Nazis, and the Russians are just going to sit on their hands?
Does Stoltenberg mention, or does the great professor mention, that during those 8 years, 14,000 people were murdered in the Donbass by NATO-backed forces?
Right.
Okay. Does anybody ever mention that? Okay. Right. And so, again, I always have to remind our viewers, Russian public opinion was furious for 8 years about what happened to their compatriots in the Donbass. Right. Why do you think up to 80% of people in Russia support Putin in this operation? Not because they're happy that Netflix is gone, not because they're happy that McDonald's is gone, Starbucks is gone. No, it's because their relatives were being killed.
That's right. That's right. And of course, this is where we get to this point whereby you get all the Michael McFauls of this world who lie by saying, well, these promises of NATO membership, they were lies. No one took them seriously. I mean, that was just a toss away line. But of course, that is absolute rubbish. When somebody tells you that they're going to do something, you have to believe them. I mean, if they say we are going to get Ukraine into NATO, you have to believe them. And if you're a political leader who just doesn't take it seriously, then you have no business being a political leader.
And particularly knowing, fully aware that this would be deemed by the Kremlin as a gross provocation and an existential threat. Right. Okay, it's not like saying we're going to boycott avocado someplace. Maybe for avocado producers it's a big deal, but it's not an existential threat to global security. This is okay. This article that you're reading to us is just shameful. It's absolutely shameful. There's no context at all. Does he talk about the coup? Does he talk about what happened to the Donbass? And does he talk about December 17th when the Russians said, "Look, enough is enough. We're putting our cards on the table now. You either react or fold your cards, and then we're going to see what happens. And we saw what happened on February 24th.
That's right. So, and that's exactly it. And there's they promised NATO membership. We know that the Biden administration was making quite explicit promises. The road to NATO membership is open, which is what Lloyd Austin told Ukraine in October of 2021. Then that the NATO, the US-Ukraine strategic partnership that was signed in November in Washington, again promising membership. You have to take them seriously. If you're a leader of Russia, you can't just not take these things. It's just like when Zelensky says at the Munich conference, we're going to have nuclear weapons. You have to take somebody seriously. I mean, no, just somebody said something, over a drunken lunch. We're not going to take it seriously. You have to take these things seriously, and it's so dishonest to say, oh well, no one really meant any of this. So no. But in this case, Freedman, he doesn't say that. He said that, well, that NATO membership, that Russia wasn't really interested in NATO. That wasn't the one. It was because of freedom. The freedom.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, this democracy, autocracy thing is so ridiculous. It's ridiculous on its face. Russia has relations with many countries of the world with various types of regime, various types. And for the most part, that's the business of those regimes. I mean, you still want to trade? Okay, we'll trade. Okay, you want to have a peaceful and a peaceful cooperation where we both win-win? Fine. When does Russia demand regime change in the world, George?
No.
You ever heard that?
No.
They're not even demanding regime change in Kiev, at least not yet.
Right. That's right. But just apropos of this, I just remember something very funny, because the other day, our friend Sergeant Schultz said something like, well, what Putin is afraid of is the sparks of freedom coming over from Ukraine. And then your friend Zaharov sent out a message saying, well, over the years, we've had a few sparks coming over from Germany. These sparks are not going to set any more fires in Russia. I can assure you of that.
Well, I mean, if you look at internet censorship going all through the European Union, look, the fate of Julian Assange. I have personal friends through Europe, one woman particularly in Denmark. Well, she's on some kind of security list, like no fly list, because of what she says when she expresses her opinion about these things. Right. There's an enormous amount of intimidation. People in the UK are intimidated. Yeah. Okay, so I don't know what these democracy and freedom is all about here. As a matter of fact, I find the European Union to be more and more antithetical to democracy, if anything. I mean, the people of Hungary speak, but they speak wrong. Okay,
that's right. And so that's it, and that's why Freedman and then McFaul in their different ways still are unable to tell us what was the reason for this expansion of NATO. Why did you do this? I mean, you knew, you had to have known that Russia would take it very unkindly to that. They've been very tolerant. As the 90s moved on, they remained very tolerant until you did this thing with Ukraine and Georgia. And instead of accepting that this was an absolutely disastrous, catastrophic mistake, you then have to do all this dissembling. Oh, no, it wasn't because of that. And no, it was because Putin's afraid of democracy. No, it had nothing to do with that. It wasn't because it was a stupid decision to do. It was because he's afraid of democracy.
No, but it's a circular reasoning, is that where NATO needs to expand to project stability and prosperity and democracy. Well, knowing that the Russians are very, very displeased with it, and there's always the underlining tone is that Russia is a threat. Well, the more you expand, yes, the more it will become a threat. And you know what? It finally happened. It finally broke. Okay, so it's self-referential. Okay, it is. Because you don't expand unless you deem one party or parties to be a threat. And then when you do expand, that becomes a reality. It's self-referential. I mean, and that's exactly what they did. And particularly since George and I don't memory hole everything, is that we chronicled, and I would appreciate everyone to look at our past videos. We talked about this almost every single day for 3 months,
Right.
that this was going to happen.
That's right. And that's the thing. I mean, if you have Lithuania now provoking a conflict with Russia by essentially imposing a blockade. Now, you have to then wonder, this is an act of recklessness. Now, let's say the Russians, move and they say, we've had enough, we're going to break this blockade. Now, I guess according to Freedman's argument and according to so many, that's it. The war has finally broken out between NATO and Russia because this is it, all for one for all. Article 5 goes into operation. Well, all that's going to happen is, same with the Ukraine. I mean, it's like, well, NATO will say, well, we're going to do whatever, we're going to take whatever measures against Russia. I mean, NATO is not going to start a nuclear war for Lithuania. I mean, that's basically, I mean, again, the Freedman was suggesting, well, the moment you attack a NATO country, that's it. All bets are off. We're into World War. Well, they're not going to start. No one is going to start a nuclear war, particularly over something so bloody stupid as trying to stop Russia, moving their goods from Kaliningrad and the Russian Federation.
Well, I don't know if you saw it. I think it was in the last news cycle. The Lithuanians, are in consultations with Brussels and all that. And then I thought it was really funny. A corridor through our country would be unacceptable. And it's just like, yeah, you already know that that's a possibility because of your own actions. Right. Okay, I thought it was this. It was a form of projection. And a corridor will be unacceptable. It's like, yeah, but that's going to be probably the solution if you don't change your position. Okay, and George is absolutely right. Again, everybody likes to talk about Article 5. We'll look at Article 1 and see who's breaking Article 1 of the NATO treaty. It's Lithuania in this case, at the behest of Brussels.
Right. Yeah, at the behest of Brussels, and that's the point. I mean, you hear of these states, which of course they're so worried about Russia, and then again, well, if worried about Russia, then why not try to have good relations with Russia? Because if you antagonize them, then you basically are facing the prospect that the Baltic states faced in 1939, 1940, when Stalin decided that we need these states for survival. We need this, we need Finland, because war is coming and we need defense in depth. I mean, that's it. I mean, that's what we can't afford to allow these states on our borders that would simply be front line for our enemies. But that's what you're doing. I mean, you're basically leading Moscow to believe we don't really have any choice. I mean, we have to take this this territory, because otherwise they're just going to use this against us.
What is so bizarre about this, George, is it really is playing a game of chicken, and it's not learning from your mistakes. The Ukrainian military is being pulverized as we speak right now, and NATO wants to up the ante? Really? This is extraordinary. Instead of looking for, George and I have commented so many times, give the Kremlin an off-ramp, so they can, exit them. No. You guys need an off-ramp yourself in a big way.
Right.
Okay. Because if there is a blockade separating Kaliningrad, the Russians will break the blockade and create a corridor. Yeah, that's what they're going to do. Okay. Right. And so, at the behest of Brussels, Lithuania's sovereignty will be compromised. That's going to be the result. Right. And I don't think no one's going to lose any sleep on that issue over here. I mean, that's Kaliningrad. That's Russia.
That's right. It's Russia, and the agreements were signed at the time of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and afterwards that no one would mess around with the transit of people and goods. You've broken that agreement. Okay, you're gonna, you want to invoke Article 5. Okay, go ahead and invoke Article 5. See what kind of a response you get in the rest of Europe. Do the Parisians, want, missiles, landing in their country? I mean, do the Germans want their country attacked? I mean, it's like, you're playing with fire and just thinking that, that's it, Article 5 goes into effect and great, Russia will just go away. Well, they're not going to go away. And then you're going to say, are you ready? Are you really ready to go to war over access to Kaliningrad?
Yeah, I think it'll be very interesting, when people are cold and hungry and they say, so what was this Article 5 thing? Okay. Right. And they're going to, really? Is that what this was all about?
Right. Yeah.
Well, let's go right to the top of our conversation here. George, I bet you're waiting with bated breath for the communique of G7 coming out. Okay. I mean, what I find, it's almost kind of embarrassing that they think they're so important still. Right. It's really embarrassing for them. Okay. Right. Because you know what, George, in this case, with Ukraine, they cannot create political facts on the ground. They do not have the assets to do it. Right. Okay. Right. They have their empty words. Right. Okay. And you know what's most pathetic about it? It doesn't help Ukraine at all.
It really doesn't. And that's the thing, because they don't seem to have any kind of a backup plan. I remember back during the bombing of Yugoslavia back in '99, the G7 would have these meetings, and then they would issue their an ultimatum. Serbia had better do this and do that, and then the bombing will stop. But they were calling the shots, because ultimately they were much stronger than Serbia, and therefore they knew that if they really wanted, they could really escalate and simply wipe Serbia off the map. They don't have any position there. So they've got this ridiculous thing: nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. And what? I mean, you don't have anything. Same with the Lithuania. We're going to stop them moving their goods. Then what? I mean, they just don't have anything. So they just sit there making all these statements. We're ready for a long war. And,
no, really? Yeah. Did you ask anybody if they support it? Okay, no. Again, there's the democracy deficit here. It's a huge democracy deficit. All it is a propaganda gambit that they have here. And the costs are difficult to comprehend if this is the kind of path they want to go down. I'm still of the opinion that they'll break the blockade, and then NATO will be standing with its pants down. Okay, so what's your next move, NATO? What's your next move?
Yeah,
they're gonna be shaking in their boots.
Right.
The thing is that it's something that I think about a lot, is that the sense of moral superiority. I don't know where they get it from. I really don't. And you know what, everyone? Geopolitics is not about moral fortitude. It had nothing to do with it.
Right.
Okay. Right. It's about I watched Game of Thrones. I was disappointed with the ending, like everybody else. But what was that all about? It was about what assets each character has, and if they have the wisdom and the fortitude to use those limited assets to get what they want. That's a whole series is about that. Okay. It's not about because good guys were killed all the time, but it didn't make any difference because I didn't have the assets to get what they wanted. Okay. Right. If you had 2 dragons, you were a pretty good position to get what you want, but it wasn't a guarantee because you have to know how to use your assets. The European Union, NATO do not have those assets, and they can't force through political outcomes that they want.
No, I think that's right. I mean, it's a very strange situation in which all they're really doing is ideological mobilization. I mean, they're not in any way seeking some kind of a negotiated outcome, which they could do at any moment. But it's like it's just this ideological mobilization. This is the West. We're drawing the lines in the sand between the democracies and the dictatorships, and I mean, it's like, and then already, okay, we're just going to go on fighting. We'll fight years and years and years. Yeah. Fighting about what?
And I thought democracies by definition, are prosperous and rich, okay? So you go down this ideological rabbit hole, and what do you get for it? Nothing. You get negative returns.
Right.
You keep getting negative returns, and the country that you want to punish most doesn't have the same negative returns. As a matter of fact, there are positive outcomes, opportunities that are happening as a result. So, you know, I'm very frustrated by the certainty of all of these people because it's ideologically driven. This is what George is absolutely right on this one. Perfect.
Right. That's right. That's it. And that's it's a very strange situation because we always think of, okay, the Cold War was ideologically driven, but at least they had the sense, at least the West had the sense to have peace, at least on the European continent. They didn't have peace anywhere else. There was war in Southeast Asia, there was war in Central America, wars in Latin America, in Africa, but they at least maintained peace on the European continent. But now, they've lost that. So no peace on the European continent with all of the adverse effects that's going to have. America could fight in Southeast Asia. Hey, well, it's just Vietnamese getting killed. We're okay. Vietnamese are getting killed, and we're okay. We're safe. Vietnam can't do anything to us. Central America, okay, we've got Central Americans getting killed. We're okay. Nothing happening to us. But now, something is happening to us. It's like, something. There's no food, no gas, no petrol. So whereas the others, the other people in the other continents, we're doing okay. Vietnamese, Indians, Chinese, they're getting rich. So,
if you want to fight over this obscure place called Ukraine, then go for it. It's you're good to go. Okay, we have other things to do.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
All righty. It's so frustrating watching this here. The G7. I can't wait for their pearls of wisdom to come out. More platitudes, okay?
Right.
And at least officially, because I think behind the scenes it's very different. But I think officially, it's like let Ukraine decide. When do great powers let little countries decide? Never. Ever happens, everyone. Never.
No, that's right. And it's a 3-day confab, so it's a long meeting, so at least the good thing is that they'll be eating well. If you're at these G7 meetings, the food will be very good.
But if you have hemorrhoid, be careful because you're gonna be sitting down a long time. Okay, so fill in your gullet. Okay,
that's right. And the wine will be of excellent quality.
If Nancy shows up, there'll be a lot of scotch. Okay, you can count on that. Okay. Who knows? Someone one of the Lindsey Graham, he's gonna come. Somebody watch. Somebody's gonna drop in. With a shield, okay, we have to make them pay.
Yeah, I think so. There's no reason why members of the legislature can't show up. I don't think it just it has to be somebody from the administration. I'm sure, Nancy can drop in. She likes dropping in on these kinds of confabs.
Yeah. Well, she's got her hands full with her anti-abortion people.
That's right.
Okay,
That's right.
She's a good Catholic, though. Don't forget.
No, very good Catholic. Exactly. Yeah.
All right, everybody. That was kind of our very broad update. And I like to point out, just because somebody thinks you're smart in the UK doesn't mean they're smart. Okay.
No.
But, I don't have sir. You can call me sir, but that's not a title that I have. Okay?
Sir, and he was, this Department of War Studies at King's College London is very famous. He's the head of that department, but he's also knighted. There's some Professor Sir Michael Howard used to be there, so it's a very famous place. So he's a very big name. That's it.
Yeah, there must have been a Monty Python episode about it somewhere. All right, everybody. This is Peter and George. We're the Gaggle. We're found on Local, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. Please visit our store. Today is Sunday, and that means you have to wait 48 hours for George's live stream.
That's right, exactly. Please join me Tuesday for my live stream on Locals. Come with comments, criticisms, suggestions, questions. Everything is welcome. And on your way out to the local watering hole, remember little buddy, he's getting particularly despondent these days. It's very hot, so his mood is definitely souring. So if you want to cheer him up, he wants to hear the sound of coins tingling in his.
Even Buddy likes liquid refreshment.
Exactly, he wants liquid refreshment. So thank you very much for all your help and friendship and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can invest in new technology, and above all, the happier Buddy will be. And remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.